Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 24th of October of 2024. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. First, let's talk about the political events that took place in Russia, and the most important, of course, are coming from the city of Kazan, where the significant number of countries, approximately 36 countries, are taking participation in the BRICS summit. Lots of countries, including Russia, Brazil, China, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, United Arab Emirates, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and many other countries are taking place in this event. Additionally, the Organization of United Nations that it was represented at the highest level. And today we received lots of insights, including additional information, additional statements that were made by Putin, for example. Putin today stated that Ukraine is being used as a tool to deal strategic defeat to Russia, says Putin at BRICS Kazan summit's final day, stressing it's an illusion to think that could be achieved. Very important statement. Furthermore, we have report that BRICS surpasses G7 in financial power, and the gap is only getting bigger. He's trying to say that these 36 countries, living less, is already more powerful than G7. And of course, the very interesting photo we got today also from the BRICS summit. In this photo, we can see that Putin probably was holding in his hands the possible money currency notes for the BRICS member continues, and this is a single currency note, probably in 100 units, let's call it like this, that according to different sources will replace the dollar. Of course, it will not replace the dollar because Western countries will not, let's say, reject this currency. They will continue using it, but obviously we're gonna see a very interesting competition between these two currencies. Very interesting. Let's wait what is going to be next. Also, we had very important updates from Moscow itself. Today we got some statements from the official Russian sources about the Korean forces, and today the Russian foreign ministry called reports about the alleged dispatch of the troops from the Korea to Russia fake news and hype. But later we got additional report that the State Duma has ratified the treaty on strategic partnership between Russia and the DPRK. So this is a very important document, and from now on, Korea is becoming the closest and the most powerful, the closest friend of Russian Federation, something like this. And from now on, after the ratification of this treaty on strategic partnership agreement, Russia can call Korea to help Russian Federation to fight with Ukrainians, at least on the territory of the Sudzha region. And as for the Sudzha region, we continue receiving additional updates. The Ukrainians are saying that the forces of Korean forces are already on the territory of this region, and they're waiting for order, and they're waiting to begin the assault operations towards the Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainians are ready as well. They're trying, during the previous days, they've been trying to dig as deep as possible to prepare additional trenches. Most likely the clashes are going to be very heavy. Furthermore, we have additional changes on the ground, additional videos from the territory of Volgovka. For example, in this video we can see Russian soldiers that were making video on the territory of the southern farms of Volgovka, which confirms that this territory was completely captured by the Russians and secured. Also, during this video we might see the significant number of prisoners of war that were captured by the Russians. Also, the Russians are saying that since the beginning of this week, around 400 soldiers of armed forces of Ukraine surrendered the Russians. 400 soldiers. This is the significant number, and the Russians are saying that a majority of these soldiers was mobilized recently, were forcibly mobilized recently. So the Ukrainians don't want to fight, and now the Ukrainians are soon going to face additional reinforcements in this direction in face of the Korean soldiers, which is obviously not very good piece of news for the Ukrainians that are located in the Kursk direction. As for other changes on the ground, today we got also some reports that the Russians managed to establish control over the village of Darina and Nikolaeva Darina, but yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this, and some sources later reported that we shouldn't be in a hurry. It's better to wait a little bit, because It's still unclear the status of these two settlements. Now let's move further and let's talk about the north in Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. The Russians currently are regrouping, trying to bring additional forces, additional reinforcements to the line of combat contact along the river of Oskol. The Russians are trying to regroup their forces to the west of Mesazharovka and Stelmakhovka and to collect the critical mass before further offensive operation in the direction of Lazova. The Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the Russians during the previous day, but most of the vehicles and artillery systems that Ukrainians were trying to use were destroyed by the Russians as a result of counter-artillery duels and as a result of drone attacks. As for the south in Kupiansk direction, I believe we can start counting days for this artillery pocket. If you remember, just yesterday the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that the village of Novosadova was captured by the Russians. It was published on the 22nd of October, and today on the 24th of October the Russian sources published the video how the Russian soldiers, how the Russian troopers were raising the flag and were waving the flag on the territory of the settlement. There are lots of episodes, lots of places where the Russians were waving the Russian flag. Based on this video, we confirmed that indeed the Russian Ministry of Defense report was correct about the situation in this settlement. Furthermore, the sources reported that the first Russian troops answered the village of Hirnyk from the north, and currently there are very heavy clashes already on the territory of this settlement. Maybe by the morning of the 25th of October, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back towards the village of Yampolovka, towards the last supply evacuation road between Yampolovka and Mirny that goes through the village, through the river of Zhiribets. If the Russians take under control Hirnyk, most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back within the next few days after the Russians capture Hirnyk. Now let's talk about the Seversk direction and a very interesting comparison. For example, the Russians 2 days ago reported, so the Russians at the same day reported about control over the village of Novosadova, and in the same day, in the same report, the Russians reported about complete control over the village of Serebryanka. As for the 24th of October, we got the video with the flag of Novosadova, but we still haven't received anything about Russian control neither over Serebryanka, Grigorovka, and over Verkhnykamenskaya. So we are waiting for additional updates, but the situation, of course, in this direction is very weird. The sources are saying that the Russians continue their offensive operation from the north in direction, trying to encircle the Ukrainians on the line between Dibrova and Serebryanka, and the Russians began offensive on the line Grigorovka-Serebryanka, also in the direction of Dibrova. The Russians are saying that there is a forces and units of 53rd Mechanized Brigade and 119th Brigade of Territorial Defense. Both of these brigades suffered losses during the previous period, during the previous stages of clashes for this forest, and now the Ukrainians might be encircled, and this is not good for the Ukrainians, of course, they understand. So most likely we need to expect that during the next few days the Ukrainians will try to evacuate and to escape the encirclement in the direction of Yampil. As for Seversk itself, we got very interesting video from the eastern outskirts of the settlement. This video is interesting because in this video we can see how the Russians were filming and were making video of the eastern outskirts of Seversk while the Russian aviation were bombing it from the positions on the territory of Bila Gora. So this is Seversk on the horizon. Right in front of us a small lake. This is the lake we can see on the screen, and the Russian positions a little bit behind of this lake. So approximately the Russian soldiers were making video of how the Russian aviation was bombing the territory of Seversk somewhere from this point. And this video confirms the reports that the Russians managed to take control over the Bila Gora during the previous few days ago. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city, the Toretsk agglomeration, because we have very important adjustments on map. Today the Russian sources published the video of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainians on the territory of the eastern block of Zabalka. And in this video we can see several drone attacks on Ukrainian edge positions, and based on this video lots of mappers have adjusted the map back work in Ukraine's favor. We did the same. And if we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of October, we got a lot of icons, and some icons were published from this district, from this part of Zabalka district, and these videos were published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in these videos we can see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this part of the district. And during the months we got a lot of updates exactly from this line between the eastern part and the western part of the same district. Based on these videos, based on this report, we have adjusted the map back more accurately, and now, as I understand, the Russians control the southern part, the Ukrainians control the central part of Zabalka district, and probably the Russians control the northern part. But we still have some doubts regarding this territory. We continue keeping this territory as a territory under Russian control, but maybe and very likely this part of Zabalka district is also under Ukrainian control. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. Currently, there are very heavy clashes for the mine of Novogrodovka III. Very heavy clashes, and as you can see, we have lots of icons from this territory. Both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, are sending more and more forces on the territory of the mine. There are very heavy clashes, and currently nobody, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians, can establish and can report about strong control over this territory. The Russians understand and the Ukrainians understand. As soon as the Russians are able to take this territory under complete control, sooner the Russians will be able to move further in the direction of Mirnograd. Without controlling over this territory, the Russians have no chances to get inside of Mirnograd. And the Russians understand that they need to enter the city of Mirnograd before winter comes, while they have possibilities to move through the fields, because when winter comes, additional attack in the northern direction will be connected with the significant losses. The Ukrainians understand this situation as well, so that's why they are sending more and more reinforcements and reserves exactly on the territory of this mine, with the purpose to slow the Russians down and not to allow them to get the initiative completely in their hands. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Selydove. During the previous video, we have already discussed the current situation and the battle for Selydove itself, and during the previous day we haven't received anything that can confirm additional progress on the ground. I'll just remind you that according to some pro-Russian sources, currently the Russians establish control around 95% of the settlement. The Ukrainians control just 5% of the settlement, and Ukraine control is located somewhere here in the most northwestern part of the settlement, as close as possible to M30 road, and if Ukrainians receive an order, they will retreat in the direction of Grigorovka or in the direction of Pokrovsk itself. As for additional videos, we continue receiving the videos with the Russian flag, with the Russian soldiers that were raising Russian flag in the central part of the settlement. Here we can see two more Russian soldiers that were showing the flag to different drones, to different units, and this video confirms not just Russian control over the central part, this video confirms a strong control over this territory. The clashes continues and the Russians are pushing further in the western direction, and according to information we have, the Russians took under control the northern part of the settlement, and now the Russians are about to enter the high-rise building area. So this is the progress on the ground on the northern part of the city of Selydove. This is the progress on the ground in the central and in the eastern part of the city of Selydove during the previous 24 hours. And we have reports that the Russians continue their offensive operation in the village of Vishnyovo, and this is the progress on the ground for the previous 24 hours in this village as well. So the clashes are very heavy. Obviously, by the end of this weekend, of upcoming weekend, most likely the Russians will take the city under complete control and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. Currently, the Ukrainians have just one task, just one goal, to hold the city of Selydove until the end of the BRICS summit. And after the end, and today I'll remind is the final day of the summit, Ukrainians most likely will retreat. So due to the fact that the summit ends today, most likely during the night between the 24th and 25th of October, the Ukrainians will retreat from the settlement completely. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Hirnyk-Kurakhove agglomeration. There are very heavy clashes, and we have changes on the ground. This is the situation in the northwestern flank by the end of the 23rd of October. This is the situation on the ground by the middle day, by this end of the 24th of October. As you can see, according to the changes on map, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the eastern part of Selydovka, and the Russians secured the territory of Izmailovka completely. Furthermore, we start receiving updates that the Russians today began a very powerful assault in the southern directions towards the mine number 42. This is the mine has the title of just a number, just 42, and the Russians are attacking this territory right now. This information was reported by different pro-Russian resources. Basically, lots of resources report about this attack. And obviously, if the Russians are able to take under control this mine and the landfill to this mine number 42, this is going to be the complete defeat of the Ukrainians with the very, very bad consequences, terrible moreover consequences for the Ukrainians. The significant number of Ukrainian forces would be encircled, and most likely this is going to be the biggest defeat maybe even since the beginning of the special military operation. So this is the situation in this direction. As for Kurakhove, we got the video that was published by the Russian sources. In this video, according to the author of this video, we can see the temporary deployment point of the Pokrovsk FPV drone operator base, and the Russians, as a result of intelligence reconnaissance operation, managed to discover this temporary deployment point, and as a result of attack a strike with FAB 3000, this temporary deployment point was destroyed. The Russians are saying that Ukrainians, as a result of this attack, lost up to 50 FPV drone operators. Furthermore, we continue receiving additional updates of how the Russians established complete FPV drone control over Ukrainian positions in the mine supply roads that goes from the mainland in the direction of the line of combat contact. A lots of geolocations of Lancet strikes, a lots of videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainians along the main supply roads. So the Ukrainians are suffering losses, and they can't do anything at this point of the special military operation. As for the village of Bagayavlenka, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to reach the outskirts of the settlement itself. There is just one barrier in front of Russians. We're talking about this company stronghold. If the Russians are able to take the stronghold under control, then I believe we can start counting days before the entire Bagayavlenka falls. And of course, we will talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. During the previous 24 hours, we got reports that the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly around the village of Livadne. The sources are saying that the sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation even managed to answer the village of Olgovska. Yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this, but most likely during the next few days we're going to receive first updates. And very important progress we can see along the line between the village of Staromayorska and the settlement of Rovnopol. The Russians captured 2 strongholds along the road, and they got to the 3rd stronghold. If the Russians can take this one, then the situation for the Ukrainians along the river of Mokry Yaly would worsen significantly. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.